Here is my top 10 fantasy rankings. You see them 1 through 10. Let's talk about each one individually. Why, if I had the 1 through 10, why I would pick that exact player at that pick. Why am I taking Bijan Robinson 1 overall? Why would I take him over Gibbs? Let's talk about it. In games with 18 plus touches on the ground last year, Bijan Robinson 6.3 yards per carry. Jahmyr Gibbs only 3.5 yards per carry. This is a huge worry because when you talk about David Montgomery and Tyler Algier leaving and them both losing their handcuffs, their touchdown vultures that everyone talked about and everyone said they were, well, yes, this is a great thing for both players. It doesn't leave volume in the air. It leaves volume on the ground. Algier and Montgomery both were dominant running backs. And if Bijan is the more dominant back in bigger volume running games, then Bijan is going to be the more successful back because they're both going to have a ton of touches this year, more touches, more room for touchdowns, more room for everything involved. And I just think if Bijan is the clear-cut sample size better running back with bigger touch games, then he's the number one overall pick. And I also just think he's the better running back flat out. Why am I taking Jahmyr Gibbs number two? Besides the obvious reasons of being an elite running back, one of the best in the NFL, Montgomery's gone. He doesn't have that touchdown vulture anymore. He's going to have a ton more work on the ground. He's still a check down guy. He's an elite running back, both in the air and on the ground. He's going to have a ton of touchdowns. He's going to have a ton of touches. It's an explosive elite offense. The Lions have an easy ass schedule. He's going to be scoring a ton of touchdowns this year. Jahmyr Gibbs is an easy top two fantasy pick. Him and Bijan are honestly 1A and 1B. You really cannot go wrong. If both of them stay healthy this year, they are going to be so elite for your fantasy team. Why am I taking Ja'Marr Chase at 3? Let's talk about it. He's the best receiver in the NFL, for one. Two, he was the leading target per game player last year in a year with spotty QB play. He always seems to be the head of the targets in the NFL. Joe Burrow should have a great year, barring him getting hurt. But when you talk about Ja'Marr Chase, even with spotty QB play last year, he was wide receiver 4. So there's nothing you have to worry about of Ja'Marr Chase himself. It's whether Burrow can stay healthy or not. I really don't think you have to worry too much about that. I think Burrow's going to be locked in. I think Ja'Marr Chase is extremely elite. I think he's the best receiver in the NFL. Like I said, I honestly think he wins the Offensive Player of the Year this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's the number one fantasy player when all is said and done after this season. Why am I taking Puka Nacua at 4? He was the second player in targets per game last year. That is a must draft in the top 5. That is a stat that screams. You need to draft me because wide receivers, the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters outside of production is targets. How much are they getting looked at? Matthew Stafford, after an MVP year, he's going to be hungry. They are trying to get that Super Bowl. They are going all in with their chips. They have aces right now. They are pushing all in because they want this timetable with Matthew Stafford with 1, maybe 2 more years. It's done after that. They clearly are going all in. Puka's gonna be a lead benefactor in that. Puka Nacua is an easy top 4 fantasy pick. Why am I taking Amon-Ra St. Brown at pick 5? This might surprise you. He's a little high. But let's talk about it. Amon-Ra might have one of the safest floors when you talk about fantasy players. And I think when you really look at what you need in fantasy, it's not necessarily upside, especially when you want to talk about your first round player. If you draft Amon-Ra at 5 and you say to yourself, you have an 100% chance he finishes as the wide receiver 3, no higher, no lower, versus a guy you could have drafted that has a 25% chance of missing the season. And if he doesn't, he's the RB1 and the fantasy player 1. You're taking the first option 100 times out of 100. Amon-Ra is such a safe option when it comes to fantasy. And like I said, I don't think there's much risk when it comes to a guy like this. And when you want to talk about game script, I've seen people say, oh, the Lions schedule is really easy. That means he's not going to be getting the ball thrown to him as much. If they are up by that many points to where they're not throwing the ball, why do you think they're going to be up that many? Probably because Amon-Ra has 4 damn touchdowns and he has 45 fantasy points while they're giving belt to ass on Thanksgiving. That's why. If they're up a ton of points where they're not passing, Gibbs and Amon-Ra, they're all going to be eating and feasting, eating turkey legs. Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably the safest pick in fantasy football outside of the top 4, and that's why I have him at 5. I think you want to draft floor. You don't want to risk, your entire season on your first round pick. You don't. You want that safe insurance blanket for your players and your team. Jonathan Taylor at 6. Why is he over Christian McCaffrey? People forget. Jonathan Taylor, RB1 until Daniel Jones got hurt. I don't know if you guys remember, but I definitely do. I was one of them making this case. He was getting put in MVP conversations. Jonathan Taylor, a running back, in MVP conversations before Daniel Jones went down. This guy seemed like he was scoring 3 touchdowns every week with 200 yards on the ground. He is an easy top 5 or 6 pick. I think there's a great argument to be taken over Amon-Ra. I just think, there's more insurance with, St. Brown, but Jonathan Taylor has an argument to go anywhere in that top 6 because of what he was doing last year. Daniel Jones will be back. The Colts will be back. Jonathan Taylor is a definite pick 6 in my opinion, but he might go top 4 in some of these leagues. Why is CMC at 7 in my rankings? Why would I take him with the 7th overall pick? Let's start by saying I have him lower than his ADP, which is around 5, because of one word: injuries. That's it. I cannot sit here and take a guy, well, yes, he is the best fantasy player in the NFL when he is healthy. That is a no-brainer. But how much am I willing to risk on a guy who seems like he's going to screw you in your league every other year? Well, yes, he was the guy, the man last year. I just can't sit here and say I confidently believe in Christian McCaffrey to have 2 fully healthy seasons when he's only getting older. I honestly won't draft CMC in any leagues that I'm in, but I think 7, I can't not have him in the top 10. He's still at 7 for me. I think you have to take him if you're at 7, but to me, I can't, advocate to drafting a guy that, has a really big, asterisk on it when it comes to injuries. I think CMC at 7 is very fair. Even in a year where it seemed like CeeDee was at his low and Pickens was at his high, CeeDee Lamb still had more targets per game. I think Dak is in for an MVP type season. CeeDee really dealt with injuries last year. It did not seem like him and Dak were on the same wavelength at all last year. I think with an entire offseason of the new look Cowboys offense with Pickens and CeeDee, another offseason, another year to go into, I think CeeDee is the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on this team. It's going to be a continuous heavy passing offense with the Cowboys. And like I said, to reiterate, I think Dak is in for an MVP type year. And if he is, which I think he is, I want the receiver and receivers that are on the benefiting end of that. I think CeeDee Lamb goes back to his old self and has that wide receiver 1 type season again. I love CeeDee Lamb in fantasy this year. I'm definitely taking him at 8, even if it's a little bit of a reach. I love it. Jackson Smith-Njigba at 9. Now let's talk about it. He had the lowest targets per game when you look at guys like Ja'Marr Chase, Puka, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That is worrying. Can he continue that same elite production even when the targets aren't necessarily there? Because targets are the most important thing for fantasy wide receivers. Because if you're not getting the looks, you can't have the production. And yes, he did have the production last year. I think I'm taking guys that get more looks, which lead to better looks and just more opportunities, over a guy that really had to do everything with what he was given. Yes, Jackson Smith-Njigba is a top 3, NFL receiver talent-wise, but fantasy doesn't always equate to that. I don't know how much I can trust Darnold to be able to continue to supplement a very relevant fantasy season when it comes to his receivers. I think Shaheed's going to be there again. I mean, I think that's going to lead to some touches and targets being taken away. I still think it's going to be a heavy run, offense with them drafting Jadarian Price in the first round. I really don't know how much I like Jackson Smith-Njigba as a super, super high pick in fantasy, but if I'm at pick 9, I'm taking him without a doubt. On to pick 10, the last one of my top 10, De'Von Achane. Let's talk about it. Why isn't he higher? Why isn't he lower? I think 10 is a perfect spot for him. I was honestly debating having Justin Jefferson in here, but this man is a running back, and that's why I have him here. He's guaranteed the touches. I don't know what that quarterback room is for the Vikings is going to look like, so I can't, say anything about Jefferson being in the top 10 just yet. But let's talk about De'Von Achane himself. Why is he the 10th overall pick? He's going to get a ton of touches. He's a lightning quick, running back. He's elite. Everything goes without saying, but the one big thing for why he's 10 for me is He is genuinely the only option. Go take a look at this Dolphins wide receiver room for me if you haven't. That might be one of the worst wide receiver rooms I've seen in my entire life. And I love Chris Bell. I think he's one of the big sleepers in this NFL, draft, but he's coming off an injury. Malik Washington, also a great player, but when you talk about receiver rooms, that is not it. Malik Willis has to go somewhere with it. I think Malik Willis will be decent. I think he'll be serviceable for their offense, but the offense is going to run through Achane without a doubt. That's why I have him at pick 10. I think if you're at 10, I think this is a safer pick just because he's such a good running back and he's going to have so many touches. I think Achane's a perfect fit at pick 10. Comment below what you thought about my top 10 rankings. Tell me if you don't agree or whatever it might be. Comment below. Comment your thoughts. I'm here for any ball talk. That's why I'm here, you guys. But I appreciate every single one of you. We'll be doing 11 through 20 next, so let me know. Let me know what you want to see out of that. But appreciate every single one of you. I'll catch ya.